The silence in the interrogation room stretched for several minutes. Kethavar stared at his hands while Talnis waited patiently. Behind the glass, Park Woo-jin and Lee Da-yoon exchanged glances. They both knew what was coming next in the general's story. After 6 months of ground fighting, my commanders advised retreat. Kethavar finally said. We had taken control of several major cities, but the cost was enormous. For every human soldier we killed, we lost 3 of our own. The Empire's high command refused to accept defeat. What did they order you to do? Talnis asked. Complete orbital bombardment. Destroy the planet's surface and eliminate all human resistance. But first we needed to secure our supply lines. There was a space station between Mars and Jupiter that the humans used for fuel and repairs. Station Omega. We had to take it to prevent human ships from resupplying. Park Woo-jin remembered Station Omega well. It had been one of humanity's newest space installations, designed to support deep space exploration. When the war started, it became a critical military outpost. The station was defended by only 200 Marines under Commander Han Ji-woo. Kethavar continued. My fleet carried 3,000 shock troops. The station had limited weapons and no escape route. It should have fallen in hours. Lee Da-eun had served under Han Ji-woo briefly before the war. The commander was known for her calm thinking and creative problem-solving. But no one had expected her to hold off an entire alien assault force. We offered Han Ji-woo the chance to surrender, the general said. Standard protocol. Save lives, preserve the station's equipment for our use. She responded by ejecting all the station's oxygen into space and sealing herself and her troops inside with emergency suits. Talnis looked confused. Why would she do that? Because she knew we needed the station intact. By removing the atmosphere, she forced us to board carefully instead of using heavy weapons. She turned our desire to capture the station into a weakness. The alien general shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My troops cut through the airlocks and entered the station. They found empty corridors and silent rooms. The humans had vanished completely. We thought they had escaped somehow. But they had not escaped. Talnis prompted. They were still there, all 200 of them. But Corporal Bae Soo-jin had spent weeks before the attack studying the station's layout. She knew every maintenance tunnel, every air vent, every hidden passage. The humans had not run away. They had become part of the station itself. Park Woo-jin nodded grimly. The defense of Station Omega had become legendary among human forces. Bae Soo-jin had transformed conventional military thinking, showing how a smaller force could use terrain to their advantage. My soldiers spread through the station to secure it. Kethavar continued. That was when the attacks began. Humans would appear from wall panels, fire at our troops, then disappear again. They moved through passages too small for our bodies. They struck from above, below, and all sides. Guerrilla warfare, Talnis noted. More than that. Sergeant Yoon So-ra and her demolition team had rigged the station's own systems as weapons. When our forces entered the cafeteria, the food preparation robots attacked them with kitchen knives. In the medical bay, the surgical equipment began operating on my soldiers without anesthesia. Lee Da-yoon shuddered. She had heard the stories from survivors, but hearing them from the enemy's perspective made them even more disturbing. The humans lived in the ventilation system for 3 weeks, Kethavar said. They survived on emergency rations and recycled water. Private Oh Dong-woo set up a workshop in a maintenance tunnel and began converting station equipment into weapons. He turned cleaning robots into mobile bombs. He reprogrammed the elevators to crush anyone who was not human. How did they identify friend from enemy? Talnis asked. They used blood samples. The station's medical computer could distinguish human DNA from ours. Oh Dong-woo connected this system to every automated device on the station. The place became intelligent and it wanted to kill us. Park Woo-jin remembered Oh Dong-woo from the service records. A quiet engineer who loved puzzles and mechanical problems. He had died defending Station Omega, but his innovations had been studied and copied throughout the human fleet. The worst part was the psychological warfare. Kethavar continued. Corporal Kang Mi-young was a medic, but she understood fear better than most torturers. She would treat wounded humans in full view of our forces, showing them that human injuries could be healed. Then she would leave medical supplies where our soldiers could find them. Medical supplies? Talnis sounded confused. Poisoned medical supplies. My troops would use human bandages and medication, then become sick or die. But sometimes the supplies were genuine and helpful. We never knew which ones would heal us and which would kill us. My soldiers became afraid to treat their own wounds. The alien general's voice grew quieter. Kang Mi-young also left recordings throughout the station. Messages from human families saying goodbye to their soldiers, children singing songs, old people telling stories. She wanted us to understand that every human we killed was loved by someone. Lee Da-eun felt tears in her eyes. The psychological aspect of the war had been brutal for both sides, but humans had used it more effectively, turning the aliens' emotions against them. After 3 weeks, I ordered a full assault on the station's central command. Kethavar said, 500 of my best soldiers, heavy weapons, and no concern for preserving equipment. We were going to kill every human and end the siege. What happened? Talnus asked. Commander Han Ji-woo was waiting for us in the command center, alone. She had sent her remaining troops to evacuate through escape pods while she stayed behind. When we entered, she was sitting calmly at the main console. Park Woo-jin knew this part of the story well. Han Ji-woo had become a symbol of human courage and sacrifice. Her final stand was taught in military schools across Earth. She spoke to us in our own language, Kethavar continued. Perfect pronunciation, flawless grammar. She had learned it during the 3 weeks of fighting. She told us that humans were not monsters by choice, but they would become monsters to protect what they loved. Then what? She activated the station's self-destruct sequence. But not immediately. She had programmed a 30-minute delay. Enough time for my troops to evacuate if we chose to leave. But if we stayed to try to stop the explosion, we would all die together. The general's hands trembled as he remembered. Han Ji-woo sat there watching us for 30 minutes. She never moved from her chair. She answered our questions about human tactics and strategy. She was polite and helpful even while preparing to kill us all. Did your forces evacuate? Talnus asked. Most of them. But 200 soldiers stayed behind to try to stop the self-destruct. They respected Han Ji-woo's courage and wanted to save her life along with their own. When the explosion came, she died with them. She had given us the choice to live, but she chose to die to deny us the station. Park Woo-jin closed his eyes. That decision had defined human strategy for the rest of the war. Give the enemy choices, but make sure every choice led to human victory. The loss of Station Omega changed everything, Kethavar said. My commanders realized that humans would rather destroy what they could not defend than let us capture it. Every battle became a race against time. We had to win quickly and completely or lose everything. But you continued the war? Talnus asked. We had no choice. The Empire had invested too much to retreat. But my soldiers were different after Station Omega. They had seen humans die with honor and courage. Some of my troops began to question whether we were the heroes of this war. Kethavar's breathing became heavier as he continued his story. The detention room felt smaller now, as if the memories were pressing in around him. Talnus watched carefully, noting every detail of the broken general's account. 3 months after the first battle, we began the ground invasion, Kethavar said. My analysts told me it would take 2 weeks to control the major cities. We had studied their military bases through our spy satellites. We knew where their weapons were stored. We thought we understood their battle plans. Behind the glass, Park Woo-jin remembered those dark days. The alien ships had landed in major cities across Earth. Their soldiers were tall and strong with advanced weapons that could cut through steel. Most military experts had given humanity little chance of winning a ground war. We landed outside their capital cities first, the general continued. New York, London, Tokyo, Seoul. Standard invasion protocol. Secure the government centers and the population will surrender. It had worked on every other world we had conquered. Lee Da-eun shifted uncomfortably. Seoul was her home city. She had been there when the alien ships landed in the Han River. She remembered the fear, but also the determination that had spread through the crowds. The first sign that something was wrong came in Seoul. Kethavar said, we sent 2,000 soldiers to capture the government buildings. They were met by Major Lim Jun-ho and only 300 human defenders. The outcome should have been obvious, Talnus made a note. But it was not. Major Lim had spent the 3 months since the space battle preparing. He did not try to defend the buildings normally. Instead, he had turned the entire city district into a weapon. Every building was rigged with explosives. Every street had hidden traps. The sewers were filled with armed humans waiting to attack. Park Woo-jin knew Major Lim's story well. The man had been a construction engineer before the war. He understood buildings and infrastructure better than most soldiers understood weapons. When the aliens came, he had used that knowledge in ways no military academy had ever taught. My soldiers entered the city expecting normal combat. Kethvar continued. They found themselves in a maze where the walls could explode and the ground could collapse beneath their feet. Corporal Kang Mi-young and her team had spent weeks rigging water pipes to spray acid instead of water. When our forces tried to take shelter in buildings, the very structures attacked them. The alien general paused, his blue skin growing even paler. Lim Junho had turned an entire city into a trap. But worse than that, he had convinced the civilians to help him. Old people, children, shop owners, they all became part of his plan. They would smile and offer directions to my soldiers, then lead them into ambushes. Lee Da-eun remembered her grandmother during those days. The old woman had insisted on staying in the city despite the danger. Later, they learned she had been part of a network of civilians who passed information to the resistance fighters. We had protocols for fighting armies, Kethvar said. We had experience with militia groups and terrorist cells. But we had never fought an entire population that treated war like a community project. Children would throw rocks with tracking devices attached to mark our positions. Food vendors would poison our soldiers' rations. Even their priests and teachers were gathering intelligence. Talnis looked puzzled. Their non-combatants joined the fighting? That is what we could not understand, the general replied. In every other conquest, civilians would flee or hide. They wanted to survive the war and return to normal life afterward. But humans seemed to believe there would be no normal life if they lost. So everyone became a soldier. Park Woo-jin nodded. That had been the key difference. Other species might accept alien rule if it meant survival. But humans had looked at the Villani Empire's history and decided that slavery was worse than death. The battle for Seoul lasted 6 weeks. Kethvar continued. We lost 800 soldiers taking control of 12 city blocks. Major Lim was killed in the 3rd week, but his plans kept working without him. Lieutenant Yu Ji-sung took command and somehow made the situation even worse for us. Worse how? Talnis asked. Yu Ji-sung was a computer specialist. She hacked into our communication systems and began feeding us false information. My soldiers would receive orders to go to buildings that did not exist. Their maps would show safe routes through areas that were actually minefields. She turned our own technology against us. The general's forearms gestured weakly. But the real problem was not the technology. It was the humans themselves. Sergeant Bae Soo-jin held a subway station for 4 days with only 12 soldiers. They were surrounded and outnumbered 50-1. Any rational species would have surrendered. Lee Da-eun knew that story too. Bae Soo-jin had become famous for her last radio message. We are out of ammunition, but not out of humans. Send more aliens. Instead of surrendering, they used the subway tunnels to attack our supply lines, Kethvar said. Bae Soo-jin and her team would disappear into the underground, strike at our convoys, then vanish again. They lived down there for weeks, drinking dirty water and eating emergency rations. When we finally trapped them, they had rigged the entire station to collapse. The alien general's voice became very quiet. Bae Soo-jin died bringing down 300 tons of concrete on my soldiers. Her last act killed more of our forces than some entire battles on other worlds. This was happening in other cities too? Talnis asked. Every city. Every town, every village. In London, Captain Nam Seok-jin turned the Thames River into a chemical weapon. In New York, Colonel Song Hai-rim used the subway system to move troops instantly across the entire city. In Tokyo, Commander Shin Yeon-woo somehow convinced our own air support to bomb our ground forces. Park Woo-jin smiled grimly. Shin Yeon-woo had been a radio operator before the war. She had learned enough of the alien language to imitate their communication protocols. For 3 days, she had been giving orders to alien aircraft, sending them to attack their own troops. The worst part was how quickly they learned, Kethvar said. When we changed our communication codes, they cracked the new ones within hours. When we altered our tactics, they adapted faster than our own commanders could plan. Private Oh Dong-woo captured one of our transport vehicles and reverse-engineered the entire drive system in 2 days. These were regular soldiers? Talnis asked. Not specialists? Oh Dong-woo was a mechanic before the war. Most of these humans had normal jobs. Teachers, doctors, farmers, shop workers. But when their world was threatened, they became something else, something we had no training to fight against. The general looked directly at the one-way mirror, as if he could see the human observers watching him. Your council wants to know if humans can be defeated. The answer is yes, technically, but the cost would be the complete destruction of whoever tries to do it, because humans do not just fight to win. They fight to make sure their enemies can never threaten anyone again. You still had superior numbers and technology, Talnis pointed out. Why did you not simply overwhelm them? Kethvar laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Because humans taught us something we did not know before. Technology means nothing if you are willing to die to destroy it. Numbers mean nothing if the enemy treats every battle like the fate of the universe depends on it. And superiority means nothing when fighting people who refuse to accept that they are inferior. The metal chair scraped against the cold floor as War General Kethvar shifted uncomfortably. His blue skin had lost its usual bright color, now appearing dull and gray under the harsh lights of the detention facility. Across the table sat Council Investigator Talnis, her 6 eyes studying him carefully while her thin fingers moved across a recording device. Behind the one-way glass, Captain Park Woo-jin watched silently. The human officer's dark uniform was pressed and clean, a sharp contrast to the alien general's tattered robes. Next to him, Communications Officer Lee Da-yoon held a translation device, though she understood the common galactic language well enough. "Tell me again why your forces retreated," Talnis said, her voice soft but firm. "Your empire controlled 12 star systems. You had the largest fleet in this sector. How did one small planet force you to surrender?" Kethvar's forearms trembled slightly. He had once commanded respect across the galaxy. Other species would bow when they heard his name. Now he sat in chains, defeated by what the Council had called a primitive species. "You do not understand," he whispered. "Humans are not like other species. When we first saw their planet, we thought it would be easy. They fight each other constantly. Their weapons are simple. Their ships are slow and weak compared to ours." Park Woo-jin frowned. He remembered the day the alien ships appeared in Earth's sky, massive vessels that blocked out the sun. The entire planet had watched in fear as the invasion began. But fear had quickly turned into something else. "We studied their wars through their communication signals," Kethvar continued. "They seemed chaotic and wasteful. They would sacrifice thousands of soldiers for small pieces of land. We thought this made them weak and stupid." Talnis made notes on her device. "But you were wrong." The general's laugh was bitter and hollow. "Wrong, that word is too small. We were not just wrong. We were blind. We saw their willingness to die and thought it meant they were careless with life. We did not realize it meant they valued something more than life itself." Lee Da-eun leaned closer to the glass. She had been on the communications team during the first alien contact. The enemy had demanded immediate surrender, expecting humans to give up without a fight. Instead, every nation on Earth had united for the first time in history. "The first battle should have ended the war," Kethvar said, his voice growing quieter. "We sent our advance fleet to their moon, 100 ships against their small defense force. Admiral Choi Min-ho commanded only 12 human vessels. The outcome seemed certain." "What happened?" Talnis asked. "They did not retreat. They did not surrender. When Captain Kim Tae-won's ship was hit and began to break apart, we expected him to abandon it. Instead, he aimed the dying vessel directly at our flagship. His ship crashed into our hangar bay like a missile." Park Woo-jin remembered Kim Tae-won, a quiet man who loved his family and enjoyed fishing on weekends. No one would have called him a monster before the war. But when aliens threatened his home, something had changed inside him. "My soldiers boarded his ship to capture survivors," Kethvar continued. "They found Sergeant Yoon Sora and her squad waiting for them. The humans had turned their own ship into a trap. Every corridor was rigged with explosives. Every room had hidden weapons. They had been planning to die from the moment their ship was hit." The alien general's hands shook as he remembered. Yoon Sora fought for 6 hours inside that broken ship. She was wounded in 3 places but kept moving. When we finally reached the bridge, she was using her own blood to mark enemy positions on the walls. Her soldiers had been dead for hours, but she kept fighting alone. Talnis looked up from her notes. "One human held off your entire boarding party?" "She did more than that. When we finally killed her, the ship's computer activated a final program. She had rigged the reactor to explode. We lost the flagship and 3 support vessels. One dying ship destroyed 4 of ours." Lee Da-eun felt tears in her eyes. She had never met Yoon Sora, but every human knew her story now. The sergeant had become a symbol of human resistance. Children learned her name in school. "That was just the beginning," Kethvar said. "We thought it was unusual. One crazy human who got lucky. We prepared for the main invasion of their planet. 5,000 ships against their defense fleet of 300. But humans had learned something from that first battle," Park Woo-jin said quietly, though he knew the alien could not hear him through the glass. "The battle for Earth lasted only 6 hours," Kethvar continued. But in those 6 hours we lost more ships than in the previous 10 years of conquest. The humans did not fight like any species we had encountered before. They did not protect their important ships or try to preserve their forces. How did they fight? Talnus asked. Like they were already dead. Every human ship fought until it was completely destroyed. They would ram our vessels when their weapons failed. They would board our ships even when outnumbered 10 to 1. Commander Han Ji-woo led a strike force of 50 Marines onto our command ship. They were all killed, but not before destroying our main communications array. The general paused, staring at the table. We won that battle. We destroyed most of their fleet and took control of their moon bases, but we had lost 2,000 ships doing it. My admirals were shaken. They had never seen an enemy willing to trade one ship for 6 or 7 of ours. You still had the advantage, Talnus pointed out. Numbers, yes, but not morale. My soldiers began to fear humans. They spoke of warriors who would not stop fighting even when mortally wounded. They told stories of humans who would set themselves on fire to damage our equipment. These were not the actions of a rational species. Park Woo-jin nodded grimly. He understood what the alien meant. Humans did seem irrational compared to other species, but that irrationality came from something the aliens could not understand. When everything you loved was threatened, rational thinking became a luxury you could not afford. The real war began after that first victory, Kethvar said. We thought we had broken their spirit. Instead, we had taught them exactly how dangerous we were, and humans are very good at learning from their enemies. Talnus leaned forward. What do you mean? They stopped fighting fair battles. They disappeared into their cities, their tunnels, their forests. Suddenly we were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire planet that wanted us dead. And humans, we discovered, are very creative when it comes to killing. What had started as desperate improvisation had become standard strategy. That the detention room had grown colder as the hours passed, or perhaps it was the chill in Kethvar's voice that made it seem so. The alien general sat hunched in his chair, his forearms wrapped around himself as if trying to hold his memories inside. The final battle was not supposed to happen, he said quietly. After the disasters at Station Omega and Kepler 442c, the Empire's High Command had decided to withdraw from human space. Cut our losses and find easier targets. Talnus looked up from her notes. But you did not withdraw. The humans would not let us. Kethavar's laugh was bitter and hollow. Admiral Shin Yun-woo had been monitoring our communications. She knew we were planning to retreat, so she forced us into one last confrontation. Behind the glass, Park Woo-jin remembered those tense final weeks. The human command had been divided about whether to let the aliens leave or force a decisive battle. Shin Yun-woo had made the choice for them. She attacked our staging area near Jupiter with the entire human reserve fleet, the general continued. 60 ships against our remaining 300 vessels. It should have been suicide. Instead, it became our worst nightmare. Lee Da-yoon had been part of the communications team during that battle. She remembered the desperate radio chatter as human ships threw themselves against the alien formation with seemingly reckless abandon. Admiral Shin knew she could not win a conventional battle, Kethavar said, so she decided not to fight one. The humans came at us in a formation we had never seen before, scattered across space like debris. No clear command structure, no apparent strategy. Chaos tactics? Talnus asked, worse than chaos. Organized madness. Each human ship was acting independently, but they were all working toward the same goal. Captain Nam Seok-jin led the first wave in a ship that was already damaged and leaking atmosphere. He crashed directly into our flagship's bridge. Park Woo-jin closed his eyes. Nam Seok-jin had been a good man with 3 children waiting for him on Earth. His decision to sacrifice himself had saved hundreds of other human lives by crippling the alien command structure. Before we could recover from that attack, Commander Yoo Ji-sung brought her squadron in from another angle, Kethvar continued. She was flying ships that should have been scrapped weeks earlier, patched together with spare parts and held together by determination. These were desperate attacks? Talnus asked. They were calculated attacks made to look desperate. Yoo Ji-sung had studied our ship designs through captured footage. She knew exactly where to hit us to cause maximum damage. Every suicidal ramming attack targeted critical systems. The alien general's voice grew quieter, but the real horror was watching them coordinate their sacrifices. Lieutenant Young Hae-in, flew her fighter into our ammunition storage bay while broadcasting targeting data to the rest of her squadron. She died to create an opening that other humans could exploit. Lee Da-eun remembered Young Hai-in from the academy, a brilliant pilot who loved flying more than anything else in the world. She had turned her passion into a weapon that had torn apart 3 alien cruisers. The humans were trading one ship for 3 or 4 of ours, Kethvar said, but they were doing it systematically, like a mathematical equation. Admiral Shin had calculated exactly how many ships she could afford to lose to destroy our fleet. Cold mathematics, Talnis observed. Hot passion applied with cold mathematics, the general corrected. Each pilot who died did so knowing exactly what their death would accomplish. They were not throwing their lives away, they were investing them for maximum return. Park Woo-jin nodded grimly. That had been the key to human success in the final battle. Every sacrifice had been carefully planned to achieve specific military objectives. Sergeant Kwon Min-seo and her Marine boarding party captured our dreadnought Eternal Victory. Kethvar continued. 20 humans against a crew of 500. They should have been killed within minutes of boarding. How did they succeed? Helness asked. They did not try to fight the entire crew. Instead, they went directly for the ship's computer core. Engineer Oh Dong-woo had trained Min-seo's team in alien technology. They were able to lock out our own crew from ship systems and turn our weapons against our own fleet. The general's hands trembled as he remembered. Min-seo broadcast a message to our remaining ships. She said humans did not want to be conquerors, but they would become whatever was necessary to protect their home. Then she used our own dreadnought to destroy 6 more of our vessels. Lee Da-eun had listened to that broadcast during the battle. Min-seo's voice had been calm and professional, as if she were discussing routine maintenance instead of turning a captured ship into a weapon of mass destruction. The psychological impact was devastating, Kethvar said. My remaining commanders realized that humans could not only defeat us, they could turn our own weapons against us. Our technological superiority had become meaningless. Your forces still outnumbered theirs, Talnis pointed out. Numbers became irrelevant when every human ship was worth 3 or 4 of ours. But worse than the tactical situation was the strategic realization. My officers understood that if we stayed in human space, we would all eventually die. Park Woo-jin remembered the intelligence reports from that battle. The alien fleet had begun breaking formation and retreating before the fighting was even finished. Admiral Shin gave us one final demonstration of human thinking, Kethvar continued. When our retreat began, she could have pursued and destroyed our remaining ships. Instead, she let us go. Mercy? Talnis asked. Strategy? She wanted survivors to return to the Empire and report what they had seen. She wanted other species to know that humans could defeat the Villani fleet. It was more valuable to let us live as examples than to kill us as enemies. The alien general looked directly at the one-way mirror again. Shin Yeon-woo understood something that our empire had never learned. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is not destruction, but demonstration. She wanted the galaxy to know that humans could not be conquered. The war ended with your retreat? Talnis asked. The war ended when I realized what humans truly were, Kethvar replied. Not monsters, not heroes, not any simple category we could understand. They were something new, a species that could transform themselves into whatever the situation required. Lee Da-eun felt a chill run down her spine. The alien's words described something she had felt but never articulated, the way humans had changed during the war, becoming harder and more determined with each battle. Captain Park Woo-jin and his Marines had started the war as peacekeepers, the general said, somehow knowing the human was watching. By the end, they had become weapons of pure will wrapped in human flesh, not because they wanted to, but because that was what survival demanded. Park Woo-jin flinched. The alien was right. The war had changed all of them in ways they were still trying to understand. The Empire's final report classified humans as a Category X species, Kethvar continued. Not because of their technology or their numbers, but because of their unpredictability. They do not follow the normal rules of warfare, diplomacy, or survival. What makes them so dangerous? Talnis asked. They refuse to accept that anything is impossible, the general replied. Other species will surrender when the odds become too great. Humans will change the rules of the game until the odds favor them. They turn their weaknesses into strengths and their disadvantages into weapons. But they are still just one small planet, Talnis observed. Kethvar shook his head slowly. That is what we thought. But during the war, Human ideas spread to other species we had conquered. Resistance movements across 12 systems began copying human tactics. The concept of fighting until victory became more important than survival. Human tactics were being used against you elsewhere? Talnis asked. Worse than that. The idea that conquerors could be defeated was spreading. Species that had accepted our rule for decades began questioning why they had surrendered. The humans had proven that superior technology and numbers could be overcome by superior determination. Park Woo-jin realized the full scope of what the general was saying. The war had not just been about Earth's freedom, it had been about proving that freedom was possible for everyone. The Empire's greatest fear was not that humans would attack us, Kethvar said. It was that they would teach others to resist. A galaxy full of species that fight like humans would be ungovernable. So the Empire chose to retreat completely? Talnis asked. The Empire chose survival over conquest. We could have continued the war and eventually won through sheer attrition. But the cost would have been the destruction of our own civilization. Humans taught us that some victories are too expensive to be worth winning. The general's voice became very quiet, and in the end that may have been their greatest victory of all. Kethvar's blue skin had grown even paler as he continued his testimony. The fluorescent lights in the detention room cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older and more defeated than when the session had begun. The Empire's response to Station Omega was predictable. He said quietly, "If humans would destroy what they could not defend, then we would take everything so quickly they could not react." The High Command ordered simultaneous attacks on 12 human outposts across their solar system. Talnis made notes on her recording device. Multiple front strategy. Exactly. Spread their forces thin. Prevent them from concentrating their defenses. The plan was sound. We had done it successfully on other worlds. But humans do not think like other species. Behind the glass, Park Woo-jin remembered those desperate days. Earth's military command had been forced to choose which outposts to defend and which to abandon. The decisions had been agonizing. The mining moon Kepler 442c was our primary target, Kethvar continued. Rich in rare metals needed for our ship construction. The human garrison there was small, only 500 soldiers under Colonel Songhai Rim. We sent 8,000 troops to take it quickly. Lee Da-un knew Songhai Rim's reputation. Before the war, she had been a mining engineer with expertise in underground operations. When the aliens came, those skills had proven unexpectedly valuable. The initial assault went perfectly, the general said. We landed our forces and overran the surface installations within 6 hours. Colonel Song's troops retreated into the mining tunnels, standard procedure for an outmatched force. Delay the enemy until reinforcements arrive. But no reinforcements were coming, Talnis asked. The humans had already written off the moon. Their command expected Songhai Rim to hold for a few days, then evacuate or surrender. Instead, she sent a message saying her forces would continue fighting indefinitely. Park Woo-jin smiled grimly. That message had become famous throughout the human fleet. Kepler base will hold until the war is over, or until there are no more humans to hold it. We thought she was being dramatic, Kethvar continued. 500 soldiers against 8,000, trapped in underground tunnels with limited supplies. The outcome seemed obvious. We began moving our construction equipment to the surface to start mining operations. You did not pursue them into the tunnels? Talnis asked. Of course we did. But engineer Lim Jun-ho had spent months before the attack mapping every tunnel, every chamber, every passage in the moon's interior. He had turned the entire underground complex into a three-dimensional battlefield. The alien general paused, his breathing becoming heavier. The tunnels were not just hiding places. They were weapons. Lim Jun-ho had connected mining explosives throughout the system. He could collapse passages to block our advance, or open new routes when he needed them. The entire moon became his tool. Lee Da-un had studied the engineering reports from Kepler 442c after the war. Lim Jun-ho's modifications to the tunnel system had been brilliant and terrifying. He had essentially turned the moon's interior into a giant machine designed to kill invaders. My soldiers would enter a tunnel and find it empty, Kethvar said. Then the passage would fill with poisonous gas, or the ceiling would collapse, or the walls would explode inward. Meanwhile, humans would emerge from passages we had already cleared and attack our rear positions. How were they moving through tunnels you had secured? Talnis asked. Corporal Bae Soo-jin and her team had been living underground for weeks before we arrived. They knew passages that did not appear on any map. They had dug new tunnels connecting different sections. They could move through solid rock while we were limited to the main passages. Park Woo-jin shook his head in admiration. The human forces on Kepler 442c had essentially become underground creatures, adapted to an environment that their enemies could barely navigate. The real genius was their shift system, HFY continued. While half the humans slept, the other half maintained constant pressure on our forces. They never stopped attacking. My soldiers were exhausted after 3 days of continuous fighting. The humans seemed to have unlimited energy. How long did this continue? Talnus asked. 6 weeks. For 6 weeks we controlled the surface of that moon, while the humans controlled everything beneath it. They would emerge at night to attack our surface installations, then disappear before we could respond. During the day they would harass our tunnel operations. The general's voice became strained. Medic Kang Mi-young performed surgery in tunnels barely wide enough for one person. She kept wounded soldiers fighting by operating on them with improvised tools in impossible conditions. Lieutenant Ryu Jae-won learned to fly our captured vehicles better than our own pilots. Lee Da-yoon remembered reading about Ryu Jae-won. He had been a civilian pilot before the war, flying small transport ships between Earth and its colonies. During the siege, he had somehow learned to operate alien aircraft by watching captured footage. Ryu Jae-won stole one of our fighter craft during a surface raid, HFY said. Within hours, he was using it to attack our landing ships. He had reverse-engineered our flight controls and weapon systems faster than our own engineers could understand them. One human learned your technology in hours? Talnus sounded skeptical. Humans have a gift for understanding machines, the general replied. They do not just use technology, they absorb it, improve it, and turn it against its creators. Private Oh Dong-woo built working copies of our energy weapons using mining equipment and spare parts. Park Woo-jin nodded. Human adaptability had been one of their greatest advantages during the war. While other species stuck to familiar technology, humans would use anything that worked, regardless of its origin. The turning point came when Colonel Song Hee-rim captured our command post, HFY continued. She led a night raid through tunnels we did not know existed. My commanders woke up with human weapons pointed at their heads. She took prisoners? No, she offered them a choice. They could surrender and be treated according to military protocols, or they could continue fighting and die with honor. Most chose surrender, but some chose to fight. Song Hee-rim respected both decisions. The alien general looked directly at the one-way mirror again. That was when I began to understand what we were really fighting. Not just soldiers, but people who believe that how you fight is as important as whether you win. The humans showed mercy? Talnus asked. They showed something more dangerous than mercy. They showed principles. Song Hee-rim could have executed our officers or used them as hostages. Instead, she treated them well and sent regular reports on their condition to our fleet command. She wanted us to know that humans could be trusted to keep their word. Lee Da-yoon understood the psychological impact of that decision. By treating prisoners well, the humans had made it easier for alien soldiers to surrender in future battles. It was a strategic choice disguised as moral behavior. After capturing our command post, Song Hee-rim had access to our communication systems, HFY said. She used them to coordinate with human forces on other worlds. Suddenly our enemies knew our troop movements, our supply schedules, our battle plans. You could not change your communication codes? Talnus asked. Every time we changed them, Sergeant Yoon Sora would break the new codes within days. She had become an expert in our technology. More than that, she understood how we thought, how we made decisions. She could predict our strategies better than our own generals could plan them. The general's forearms gestured weakly. The siege of Kepler 442c ended when Song Hee-rim offered us a trade. Safe passage off the moon for all surviving alien forces in exchange for a full prisoner exchange and medical supplies for both sides. You accepted? My remaining commanders voted to accept. They had lost 6,000 soldiers taking control of empty tunnels, while the humans controlled everything that mattered. The moon's surface was useless without access to the underground facilities. Park Woo-jin smiled. The defeat at Kepler 442c had actually been a strategic victory for the humans. They had tied up a large alien force for 6 weeks while other human units prepared defenses elsewhere. When we evacuated, Colonel Song and her troops emerged from the tunnels to watch us leave. HFY said, I expected to see 500 exhausted, starving soldiers. Instead, I saw people who looked healthier and more confident than when the siege began. How was that possible? Talnus asked. They had been living off our supplies for weeks. Every raid on our surface installations had brought back food, medicine, and equipment. They had used our resources to sustain themselves while bleeding our forces dry. The general's voice became very quiet. As our ships lifted off, Song Hee-rim broadcast a message to our fleet. She thanked us for the combat experience and said her troops had learned valuable lessons about fighting superior forces. She promised to share these lessons with other human units. She was preparing for future battles? Talnus asked. She was preparing to teach other humans how to turn any environment into a weapon. The siege of Kepler 442c became a training manual for human resistance. Every tactic they had used, every innovation they had developed, was studied and copied throughout their military. Park Woo-jin knew that was true. The lessons from Kepler 442c had revolutionized human military doctrine,